We're up to the Mishnah and Daf Tzadi Gimel Amid Beis, correct?
Right.
Okay, good. The Mishnah says like this: Chaymer b'smicha mibetnufa. We find the stringency that smicha has over waving. Right? There's different processes by different carbonos. There's smicha, as we talked about yesterday, and then there's waving, different parts of the carbon. There are, in certain ways, smicha is more severe than waving. Ubetnufa b'smicha, and in certain ways, tnufa is more severe than smicha. In what regard? So. Now, when it comes to she'echad meinif l'chol hachaverim ve'ein echad soymech hachaverim, in one regard, smicha is more severe, and this is something I probably should have clarified yesterday, and that is, if let's say 5 people own a carbon, only one of them will do the tnufa for all the owners. One partner will be, sent up, and he'll do it. Now, when it comes to smicha, it's not like that. We had yesterday, but the Gemara speaks it out now. When it comes to smicha, every person has to do a separate smicha, every partner. So that's something that smicha is more severe. So if there's 5 people that own a carbon, one of them will do the tnufa for all 5, but each one will separately do a smicha, bum, 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 bum. And the Gemara, by the way, the Gemara explains very simply. The reason is very simple. By the smicha, the reason why each one has to do it is because we're all the owners. By the tnufa, we all can't do it at the same time, because if we do it at the same time, then there's a chatzitza. Your hand has to be on the carbon. So if I'm there and the Menachos, Mr. Lodge, and Gavin, and my father, it's all that. And then you'll say, well, do it one after the other. The problem is it's tenufa, below tenufot. One and not multiple. Smicha, you could do multiple. You can only wave once. So that's one regard that smicha is more severe in that each partner has to do their own smicha as opposed to tenufa. Okay. More severe, it's just a difference. But now, chomer b'tnufa. Now, how is tnufa more severe? Tnufa applies both by private carbonos and communal carbonos. By the way, tnufa applies when the animal's alive and when the animal's dead. There are certain carbonos that you wave the animal. No. On the ones that they do, on the shlomim, daka, and the shlomim and the lachmi toida. Certain carbonos, but the point is, you have waving when the animal's alive, certain shlom the animal's alive, and we have waving when the animal's dead, certain shlom when the animal's dead. So we find waving alive and dead as opposed to smicha. Obviously, the animal has to be alive. You can't do smicha when the animal's died. We also have tenufa on bread, right? You would take the lachmei toida and you would wave the toida. That's bread. There's no smicha on bread. There's only smicha on an animal. Okay. Okay, so that's a certain area, certain ways that the tenufa is more severe than the smicha. So the Gemara just speaks out sources for this. Tan Rabbanan Karbono, the pasuk says Karbono by this shlamim l'rabas kol bali karbon l'smicha. That means that all the owners have to do their own smicha. So if there's 5 partners, 5 smichas. Sheyachal. Now, why would I think not like that? Because we find by the tenufa, all 5 do not do it, only one does it. So you might think smicha is the same. Sheyachal, because you could argue the following. Haloi dinu, I can make the following kavachomer. That only one partner should do the smicha. Why? Uma tenufa when it comes to waving. Shenisrapta b'shchutim. There's tenufa even on a dead animal. And meaning, there's more tenufa than there is smicha. There's more opportunities for tenufa because you could do tenufa on a living animal. You do it sometimes on a dead animal. You sometimes do it on bread. And still only one partner does it. So smicha, kavachomer, only one partner should do it, not all 5, not all the partners. So how do I know that if there's 5 partners, each partner has to do their own separate smicha? This is really what the Gemara meant yesterday. I just didn't speak it. I apologize. That each owner has to do their own smicha from the word karbano. Well, most animals do. Yeah. Karbanei tzibur. Most karbanei tzibur don't have smicha. There's only 2 karbanei tzibur that have smicha. So it says the Gemara, v'tisraba tenufa b'chubarin. So wait a minute. Why don't I do the opposite? Now that I know that each partner has to do their own smicha, why don't I make a drasha that each partner should have to do their own waving? Reverse it. Once I know, make a drasha the reverse, and that is that. If each partner has to do their own smicha, then each partner should have to do their own waving. It's the same following. Which is more severe? Tenufa. And so if the smicha, which is more kal, each owner has to do it, then kal v'chomer, the tenufa, each owner should have to do it. So in other words, how do I know that when there's 5 partners, only one partner waives it on behalf of all 5, and each one does not do it on their own? So the Gemara says very practical, mishum d'le'efshar, because it's impossible. Why? Heichi lav, how would you like all the partners to do the tenufa? Go for it. Explain it to me. So, linfu kula b'adi adadi, they can't all do it at the same time, because if all 5 of our hands are below each other, then the bottom 4 are not touching the animal, so it's not a proper tenufa on their behalf. So you say, well, you can't do it at the same time, so do one after the other. And linfa v'lehid v'liniv, and if you want to do one after the other, like smicha, tenufa amar achmana v'lo tenufos. The fact the Gemara understands that the word tenufa, it means singular, once. It's a one-time only deal. You can't have multiple people do tenufas. So because it's impossible, only one partner does it on behalf of the all 5. Now, the Gemara said there's no smicha on a dead animal, a shechted animal. It has to be alive, which I think is davar pashut. Let me just say outside what we're going to see. The Gemara basically has a kasha that there's a brisa. The brisa describes if the Kohen Gadol, let's say, chooses. The Kohen Gadol, he has a wild card. He's like the Joker. He walks into the Beis HaMikdash anytime, and if he wants to do a korban, any korban, he gets it. For whatever reason, the Kohen Gadol shows up, I want to do the Tamid Shel Shachar. He gets it. So the Brisa speaks out how he would do the Tamid Shel Shachar. First of all, the Kohen Gadol was usually an older man, so he would usually, and the ramp is very tall. The Brisa is going to describe how they would help him walk up the ramp. He was an older man, you understand? The basic premise is everything that he would put on the Mizbeach, every piece of the korban, he would lean on it first. So they'd give him a foreleg, he'd lean, throw it. They'd give him a head, he'd lean. And so you see, this animal's already shechted. It's in parts. So you see this smicha on pieces. That's the Gemara's kasha. So the Gemara says, smicha b'shchut and lesa, there's no smicha on shechted animals. It has to be living. But doesn't the Mishnah say not like that? The Mishnah says, Bizman she'kohen gadol roitz lahaktir. If let's say the Kohen Gadol wants to bring the Tamid Shel Shachar. So this is the process. He would go up the ramp, and his gabai, the second in command, the skan Kohen Gadol, would be to his right. When they would get the halfway point of the ramp, the skan would grab his arm to help support him, to make sure that look at this end. The Kohen Gadol, again, like I said, he's normally older, and they want to make sure that he doesn't that he has strength. And they help him ascend to the top. There were many Kehanim that were involved in the Tamid Shel Shachar. So each different korban would have a piece of the korban and give it to the Kohen Gadol. So you have the first one hands him the head and the leg. So what does the Kohen Gadol do? He leans on it and then throws it on the fire. Oh, by the way, see, he is leaning. Keep going. Then a second Kohen would hand him the 2 forelegs. Again, Kohen Gadol. Again, the Kohen Gadol would lean on it and throw it. By the way, also, it's not just that there's smicha on a shechted animal. There's multiple smichas. He's doing this to every part of the animal. What if it's just on the fire? Nishma tasheni v'halach. Then the second Kohen would leave. Part of the process is that we want as many Kahanim involved to show chashivas to the Kohen Gadol. That's like, look how many people are lining up to give it to the Kohen Gadol. So each Kohen would have a different piece of the korban that would hand it to him. By the way, if it is too heavy, he could do the smicha, and then the skan can throw it on the fire. The point is, he's doing multiple smichas on a shechted animal. What's going on? So the Gemara says, Amar Abaya hasa mishum kvoidoi the Kohen Gadol. The answer is, Abaya says, this is not real smicha. This is covet of the Kohen Gadol. What does that mean? So the way Rashi explains it is, we want to show that when the Kohen Gadol does an avodah, it's special. It's different. He's not like a regular Kohen. So we want to show that there's a chashivas to his avodah. So what we do is, he leans on the korban. It's not real smicha. It's not the smicha that we're talking about. This is purely to make the process a little bit different, to show that when the Kohen Gadol is involved, it's different. So it could have been, I don't know what other, it's like a flourish. We wanted to show something chashivas.
The Gavin would say
pomp and circumstance. He said, Hadran Allah, what was this last parak called? Hadran Allah Shtei Midas. Okay, good. New parak. The new parak deals with the lechem haponim, the showbread. Now this is actually very fascinating. And this, the Mishnah will describe how the showbread looked. Again, there were 12 on the shulchan, 2 rows of 6, Good. The Mishnah says, Shtei halachem, there's two karbanos that we're going to deal with. The lechem aponim, which is the showbread on the table that was brought every Shabbos, and the shtei halechem, which is the two bread brought on Shavuos. Shtei halechem, there are two loaves. One of the halachas is, niloishes achas achas. They have to be kneaded separately, a dough at a time. You don't do both at the same time. You do one, and then you do the next, as we'll see in based on a pasuk. V'nefas achas achas, and they're baked separately, one at a time. That's the shtei halechem. Good. Lechem aponim, the showbread, which were 12. Niloishes achas achas, they're also kneaded one at a time. V'nefesh shtayim shtayim, but they're baked twice at a time. Two at a time they're baked. Okay, so you're going to do 6 different bakings of 2 at a time. Now, the showbread had a very unique shape. As we'll talk about today's daf, the shape was either an open box. Think of like a U. That was one option. That's the basic classic understanding of what the showbread looked like. There's a different approach, as we'll see in today's daf. So the Gemara says like this, yeah? So the Mishnah says, how do you get a showbread to look that way? However you make it look, it's a very unique shape. They would put the dough in a mold to keep it that way. According to some opinions, the mold was actually, it's a Shaila Rashi and Taisus. According to Taisus, the mold was actually inside the bread, meaning you would have the dough and then you would put the mold on top of the dough, forcing the dough to be in a U shape. So anyway, so it was a mold to keep it in earth. So they would take the dough, put it in a mold, kishuroida, and then when they would remove it from the fire, then they would remove from the oven noisel tfus. They would put it in a different mold, kadeshli skalkalu, so that it stays its shape. Now the Gemara continues. The Gemara begins. We said one of the halachas, the shtei halechem, are kneaded one at a time. Minan immediately. How do I know this? The Tana Rabbanon shnei esreinim yeh hachala hachas, chala achas. Meaning, you have to make it one at a time. Okay? That's by the lechem aponim. How do I know the same halacha applies to shtei halechem, that they're kneaded one at a time? Tamalomer yiyah means it should be the same way. Okay. Now, uminayin she'afiyasan shtayim shtayim. How do I know that the lechem aponim, the showbread, are baked 2 at a time? Tamalomer v'samta osam. V'samta, meaning you place, osam is plural. The minimum amount of plural is 2. So that means you place both of them in the oven 2 at a time. Now, shtei halechem are baked 1 at a time. Yachalav shtei halechem. How do I know the shtei halechem are slightly different? Tamalamar osam. Osam means dafka, the lechem aponim are baked plural 2 at a time, as opposed to the shtei halechem, which is 1 at a time. Meaning dafka the lechem aponim osam, as opposed to the shtei halechem, which is 1 at a time. Now the Gemara has a quick point though. You just said the word osam teaches me both. It teaches me that it's plural, and it teaches me that shtei halechem are different. How do I learn out both from two things from one word? Hay osam hay apiktis. The Gemara says im kein lema krav is samtam. My v'samta osam shamina tarti. One is from the word samta, one is from the word osam. Because osam is plural, but if it meant that everything was plural, it would be v'samtem osam. V'samta means that there's another one that's singular, i.e. the shtei halechem. Lechem aponim 2 at a time, the shtei halechem 1 at a time. Good. Now, there was, in order for the shtei halechem to have its shape, again, it had a very unique shape, they had to put it into a mold. Now, the Gemara is going to explain there were 3 molds. They had a mold when it was dough. There was actually a mold in the oven so that it baked that way. And then out of the oven, they would put it back into a 3rd separate mold to keep its shape. So we'll get to the shape in a moment. And Pashtus, the shape was a U, like this. Pashtus, it was like this, but there is an opinion that holds that it actually looks more like a kayak. Interesting. Now that's Amid Beis, just the 2 different opinions and how the different formation of the shulchan looked, depending on how you hold. If you look in most chumashim, they all make it look like a U. I don't think they make it look like a bow. They make it look like a U. By the way, there's I don't have it now, but the new chumashim, the new thick art scroll, the blue ones, I don't know what they're called. They're very beautiful. They have new pictures, again, like a U, and I'll explain. Actually, they point out something interesting change. So anyway, so the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanon, v'samta osam, you place the lechem aponim bitfus in a mold. So the Gemara clarifies, shloisha defusim hayu, they had 3 molds. Noisel tfus v'dayni betzak, you put it in a mold when it's a dough, so it has that shape. And in the oven, it was baked in a mold, so that it was baked in that shape. And out of the oven, you would put it into a third mold to keep its shape. Now, quick question. Why do I need a third mold? Why can't I put it back in the original mold that it had when it was dough? The answer is kivin daf lenafcha. The answer is very simple. Once dough bakes, it's bigger, and you need a third mold. So you have the raw mold, the baking mold, the already baked keeping it mold. Now, what was the shape? So itmar lechem aponim keitzad osin osam. Go to the next page. So there's two basic opinions. One is the more classic opinion, and one is more of a chiddush opinion. Rav Chanina Amar kimin teva prutza. It's like an open box. Think of a UPS box that opens. So that's the top. So there's the box and the open flaps. It's like a mamish, like a goalpost. Lahavdil. So that's the first opinion. That's Rav Chanina. Rav Yochanan says no. Kimin sfina rekedes. It's like a kayak, which is it sort of goes down to a V. Now this is a major difference, obviously. By the way, the major difference between these two opinions is whether it's flat on the bottom or not. According to Rav Chanina, it's a box, so it's flat. According to Rav Yochanan, it comes down to a kayak, mamish like a kayak, so it's shaped like a V. Oh, so that's the Gemara now is going to go through, depending on which opinion, how did it stand up? How is there room on the shulchan? Okay. Says the Gemara, Bishlom alamanda Omar Kamin Teva Prutza. I understand if you hold that it looked like a box. Hainu de Yasib Azikin. Okay, so this is interesting. I don't know why. This is just as a completely an aside. Mrs. Amenowitz came over to me and we were talking. In the Art Scroll Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, they have a picture of the Shulchan. No, not in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. In the Rashi Chumash, where they translate just Rashi, they have a picture of the Shulchan. The Shulchan was a table. It had the 6 and 6. And then in addition to the bread, there were 2 spoons of frankincense. Now, where were the spoons? So the pasuk says, Osam, it was on the bread itself. On the very top loaf, spoon. That's how it pictures. In the new ones, in the new chumashim, in the new Ars Chumashim, the ones I just bought for the shul, they have pictures in the back that are colored pictures. They actually put the spoons on the table. So I thought that's very strange. Like Art Scroll, obviously it's not Art Scroll Shita. It's a machlekes tanoim. But it's just interesting as to why that, like, they changed their view from the Rashi to this one. That one follows one Tana, meaning one Tana believes that the spoons are on the bread, another Tana believes they're on the table itself. Now, our Gemara assumes they're on the bread. So says the Gemara Shaila, I don't understand. If it's flat, I get how you leave the spoon on the flat bottom of the bread. But if it's a V, how is it holding a spoon? So says the Gemara, if you believe that it was a flat box, so it had a flat bottom, I understand how the spoons rested. And that's how you could rest the top spoon on the top loaf, because the Gemara at this point assumes that the spoons were on the bread itself, which is the presumption the Gemara will have until about a week from now. So if it's on the spoon, so fine, like the Art Scroll Rashi. So the point is, if it's on the bread, it makes sense because the bread is flat. But if you believe that it comes down to a V shape, how do you leave the spoon on the V shape? It'll tip. Says the Gemara, Hey Chavi Yosef Bezikin. So the Gemara says, Makom Ovid Lehei. The answer is that even if it's shaped as a V, they must have carved out a little bit. They indented a little bit at the base. To leave the spoon there. So the point is, even if you believe it's a V, even if it's like a V, they must have placed a little bit of an indentation in the top loaf so that you could rest the spoon there, at the bottom of it. So the way they describe it...
Figure 5.
Figure 5. No, was it?
Yeah. That's where they put the underside there, that's where they hold up.
No, that's the next one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry?
How did the loaf sit with the V shape?
Oh, no. So we haven't figured out how they sat on the table. That we'll deal with.
Where were the spoons? One was on top.
One was on the top and one was on the other top. But it was...
The other sheet.
The spoons were resting in the top loaf. Now, if the loaf is flat, perfect. If the loaf comes to a V, it's hard to rest something in a V.
The top is flat on the V one.
No, it's not. No, it's a hollow V. The loaf is a hollow V. Think of my hands. How do I keep the spoon in the center without it tipping? So the Gemara says, you're right, they would they would push in a little bit to make a little bit of an indentation within the loaf to rest the spoon.
And the top of the one which is square, like a box, there's no problem.
Correct.
The one which is a V.
If they're all shaped like V's, how are you resting a spoon in there without it tipping?
It's hollow. You're saying
It's hollow like this. His mamish looks like this. Looks like my hand.
like a bank crank.
Yeah. So if you put a spoon there, it'll tip. So the answer is they had to make some sort of indentation within the loaf itself that a spoon can rest flat. Some sort of indentation. No, that's the point. It's a V. A V is not flat. That's the major difference. Says the Gemara. Hold on one second. So just to clarify, Taisus believes, I mentioned this before, Taisus believes that they put the mold in the dough, so that the dough, when it was baked, it came out as a V. It did not rise. It was mamish shaped like a V, according to Rav Yochanan. So if it's a V, how am I putting a spoon in the middle of a V? It'll tip over. The answer is you push in a little of indentation. That's the point. The point is that the end result will either be shaped like this, like a box, flat bottom, sides up, or a V mamish. So says the Gemara, let's go weiter, keep going in this discussion. Basically, the way the Shulchan works is you have a table, okay? You had the loaves. Now, in order for the loaves to not crumble, as we'll see, there were two side posts, and then there were pipes that rested across, 3 pipes in between each loaf. Think of it like a tray. So three pipes that you rested the bread on top of. Okay, so here's the problem though. If it's a box, totally get it. Same level, you could put a pipe, you could put a pipe, you could put a pipe. It'll rest perfectly. But if it's a boat where it gets very, very narrow at the very end, you could put a pipe across the middle, but the end, it'll roll off naturally because at the end it tapered off. So says the Gemara, how did it stay? So the Gemara responds, Morsha Avidle. At the very end, they would add a little bit of a dough so that there'll be a little bit of a lip. So at the very end of the canoe, think of the V like a canoe, there would be a little bit of dough at the top, so it would go up to catch a little bit of a lip, so you'd be able to put the 3 pipes. The Gemara continues, Bishlamanda Amar Kimin Teva Prutza, Hain the Samchla Snifim Lechem. Elamanda Amar Kimin Svenor Kedes, Heicha Samchi La Snifim the Lechem. So here's the kasha. The kasha is, okay, you have these sides, you have these side posts, right? The question is, if the bread is flat, it makes sense of how it works. But if it's rounded, then how are the side posts going to help? Okay, if something is flat on the table and it's straight edge, so then the side post will hold it in. But if it comes to a V, the side posts, it'll just tip over. The side post won't help. The Gemara, no, because the side post, I guess the Gemara feels that the side post, it won't secure it well enough. You'll see the answer. The Gemara explains, the Ogil Megel. The answer is, the side posts, according to this opinion, were not just posts on the side, they actually had a roundish base, a roundish mold on the bottom. So it would actually fit perfectly. Pashtus, these side posts are just literal posts on the side. So the point is, if it's a side post regular, the bread, if it's flat, it'll stay. But if it's rounded little boats, they'll just tip over. The answer is, according to this opinion, the side posts actually had with them these metal cylinders that would stick out, creating a perfect boat shape that the boats would then sit in. So it's a slight, ArtScroll happens to have a picture in figure 7 that does help. I'll show you afterwards. The Gemara then says, which is a very simple question. Why do I need these side posts at all if they're shaped like a box? If they're shaped like a boat, they're literally going to tip over unless you have these side posts with the mold. But if you believe they're shaped flat, why do I need the side posts at all? So the Gemara just says very simple. Pasha, what are they needed for? If they're flat, they're not tipping over. We're assuming that the purpose of the side posts is to stop the tipping, but they're not going to tip over anyway. So the Gemara says, Agav yukr de lechem talach. The purpose of the side posts, if they're flat, is not to avoid tipping. It's to distribute the weight. If you have 6 loaves on top of each other, they'll crush each other. These side posts with with the poles across, distributed the weight in a way that it would not crumble. Now, one last discussion. Okay, here's the last point. The way the shulchan, it's hard because you have to envision the shulchan in your head. But think about it like this. Gavin, we did this when we were trying to figure out tables, right? You got to figure out tables. You have to figure out, is there enough space for everything on the table? Now, the shulchan, if the shulchan was, how did you have the side posts at all? Pashas, the side posts were on the top of the table, right? They're on the top of the table. The problem is if it's flat, the bread takes up the whole table. There's no room for the side posts. The bread pashtos were so wide, they took up the whole table. Now, if they're shaped like a boat, they're coming in, then I could put the side posts around because they get thinner at the base. But if they're flat, they're literally taking up the whole table. The Gemara assumes at this point. So the Gemara says...
Are you talking about diagram 8?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yeah, so Bishlam, meaning, you see in diagram 8, it's possible for it to rest on the table. If it goes down like a boat, because it gets thinner at the bottom, I could sort of squeeze it in. But if it's flat, it's going to be off the table. Let's say the shulchan, let's say, was 12 inches. The bread was 12 inches. How are you putting side posts on? There's no room. If it was start off at 12 inches, but because it's a boat, it goes down to 1, literally it would come down to a V, so then I could stick it around it. But if it's flat and it's 12 inches, and the table's 12 inches, how am I getting side posts on it? So says the Gemara, how is it in the air? I'm sorry, are they on the ground? The Gemara says in. According to this opinion that they're flat, the side posts were not on the table. They were actually on the ground. So you had the shulchan, the side post started on the ground and went right up alongside it, keeping it, so it might have looked, it wasn't on the table. It actually started on the ground and it went up. So then there were side posts, but they didn't start on the table because there's no room on the table. They were leaning against it, like this shtender. The shtender is leaning against the table and it starts on the ground. That's what the side posts look like. The Gemara says, "The Amar of Abba bar Mamel, l'divrei ha'omer k'min svina rekedes, snivim agabe shulchan menachin, teva prutz snivim agabe karku menachin." If it's like a boat, then the side posts were on the table. But if it's a box, the side posts were on the ground. Let's just end with this. Kiman azla hadamar of Yehuda, who is the author of the following statement? Halechem ma'imidas asnifin. The bread supports the snifin, the side posts. And the side posts support the bread. The Gemara says, that follows the view that it's a boat, because according to this, the boat, you need both of it to sort of to be standing, because the dafka has to be on the table with the mold, and all together, then it works. But if it's like the table, like a box, it's going to be on the ground, going straight up. All right, we'll stop here. It works.